for joining us. This is fantastic to get us all together and online. For everybody tuning in, thank you for joining us to this Tech Doc discussions. We would like to thank our sponsors, Cayman Tech City and Digital Cayman, for making this all happen. If you have any questions for our speakers today, you can pop that into the Digital Cayman Slack channel. It's called Economic Recovery Working Group. Following the panel discussion, we will have time for a Q&A session, and we'll read out your questions then. Now I'd like to pass it over to Alee, who will begin with introductions and will be moderating today's discussion. Alee, over to you.
Thanks, Caitlin. First of all, thanks everybody for joining on our COVID distance meeting. Our tech talks usually held in a bar in a little bit rowdier circumstances, but we appreciate everybody making the time to join us. We have a very interesting and diverse panel here today to talk about how the tech industry can help with the recovery of the Cayman economy. And so I'm not going to mess up anybody's bio. I'm going to have them do their own intros by telling us a little bit about their name, your role, where you tend to spend most of your time before COVID, when now you're spending all your time at home, and your favorite drink. So I'll start off and then we'll hand over to Marla. My name is Alee. My role is as the ICT and telecoms regulator here in the Cayman Islands. I used to spend most of my time at Alista Towers, third floor, apparently all daylight every day, if you ask my wife. And my favorite drink is a gin and tonic. Over to you, Marla.
Alee, are you hearing me well?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Well, I'll start with my favorite drink. First of all, I'm doing dry 2020, so pray for me. But I'm from Trinidad, and I don't know if you all know, but the national drink in Trinidad and Tobago is Scotch and coconut water, as we say, Scotch meaning Scotch whiskey. But I haven't had one in too long. So let's not talk about that. I spend all my time in Barbados. I'm based here just about 2 years now. I am the chief economist at BIT Incorporated. We are a fintech entity here in Barbados. We were the first in the world to digitize a fiat currency on the blockchain when we digitized the Barbados dollar about 3 years ago. The IMF classifies it as a synthetic central bank digital currency that we have here in Barbados, and it runs on our M-Money mobile wallet. We are right now piloting a digital central bank digital currency for the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. And that's going to be a full-fledged CBDC, not a synthetic one like the one we've done in Barbados. And I spend most of my time dealing with the regulators and governments around CBDC itself.
Charlie, over to you.
Okay, I'm Charlie Kirkconnell. I'm the CEO at Cayman Enterprise City, and we are an award-winning knowledge and technology-focused special economic zone. The purpose of our project is to attract the industries and jobs of the future to the Cayman Islands. I spend most of my time at Strathbell House, which is where our main offices are. And my favorite drink is a Stoli on the rocks.
Awesome. And finally, John.
Hello, my name is John Edge. I run a venture studio for a Wall Street merchant bank. I am an owner of businesses on Cayman in the fantastic Cayman Enterprise Zone. I see Cayman as a transformative place for the digital economy, and it's something that I said to Charlie and the crew when I came probably 5 years ago. Looking forward to today, and my favorite drink is a jalapeno margarita.
Awesome. All right, we're going to jump right in. Nothing easy. We're going to start with some economics, since we've got an economist in the house. And I think we can all feel how an economy that grinds to a halt, what that kind of looks like. Never thought we would want to see that, but we're seeing it large and small. So Marla, I would ask you that given the impact that this crisis, the pandemic is having on economies large and small, and globally, it's obvious that we need to be innovative with our policies as governments, with our laws and our business processes in order for us to do any kind of decent recovery coming out of this. Are there specific legislative changes that you think we should be looking at as a country, as a region, to help us recover from this economic downturn post-COVID?
Sure. Certainly, I mean, as you rightly said, we've had a sudden stop in pretty much every economy in the world to varying degrees. And one of the things that has, I suppose, come to us as a digital currency, blockchain-based entity is that you have so many governments that have suddenly an imperative to disperse funds, whether it's unemployment benefits or social welfare benefits, to its citizens, and can't do that in a way that adheres to the COVID-19 social distancing protocols, because people can't go lining up at ATMs and banks and so on to cash checks, or line up at the social welfare office to get a check, for example. And so one of the things that it's a common theme these past 2 months or so is, many governments and central banks reaching out saying, how can you help us get this money disbursed on mobile wallets, for example, or cards? So that's something that I think that all of a sudden everybody is interested in, which, I mean, should have been a reform that should have been in the works beforehand. As I mentioned earlier, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is doing their digital currency pilot because they're looking to reduce cash usage by 50% in the next 4 years. Almost 95% of all transactions in the Eastern Caribbean take place in cash. And so the central bank has, from a development perspective, a priority to deal with that. But now all of a sudden, this has become a priority for almost every government because they have so many disbursements that they need to distribute to their citizens. The other thing that it's important to bear in mind is, like you said, you can't do these kinds of reforms unless you have the legislative leeway to do it. And so in Barbados, for example, the central bank just this morning had a consultation on a draft bill to introduce a new payment system here in Barbados. I saw that the Cayman Islands government put out a draft digital asset legislation. And these are very important reforms and advances being made in these two countries, for example, to help underpin and facilitate this kind of digital transformation that we need anyway, but that COVID-19 really exposed as a priority. And finally, I think one of the most important developments that I think as a region, and even internationally, but let's just deal with the region first, is the fact that when we have to trade between each other, and as you would know, coming out of COVID-19, you have all of these supply chain disruptions, and many countries can't secure the kinds of goods and services that they would have normally because shipping has been interrupted and so on. But we have a thriving agriculture sector in some countries in this region. You have Belize, you have Jamaica, Dominican Republic, of course, Guyana and Suriname as well. And it would be, to me, it would be a tragedy if we allowed this crisis to pass without us trying to figure out how best can we leverage our regional brothers and sisters and the goods and services that we produce as a region, and to see how we can build greater food security on a regional scale. Because of course most of us are too small to think about food security on an individual level. The problem with promoting greater intra-regional trade and even remittances is that every time you have to send money, say from Cayman to Jamaica, which I know is a problem that you guys had when the money transfer services were not allowed to operate based on the COVID-19 protocols, is that you have to use these expensive money transfer services. You have to use US dollars. It has to go through the international banking system, and settlement it takes a long time and costs a lot of money. So we've been working on an initiative called the Caribbean Settlement Network that looks to well, first of all, it looks to make up for the deficiencies and mitigate the challenges that were encountered with the multilateral clearing facility that existed in the 1970s, that sought to allow for countries in this region to trade with each other and settle each other in local currency. That meant that you did not have to use US dollars, you did not have to use the international banking system. But now we have digital currencies. And so, for example, you're in Cayman, I'm in Barbados. Could you imagine if my central bank here in Barbados and your SEMA in Cayman came to an agreement that we would swap some of each other's currency, digital currency, based on a quantum of, let's just say 100 million US dollars equivalent. We agreed to the exchange rate between the two currencies. And when I import something from you, I pay you in Cayman dollars because I have an inventory of Cayman dollars. And when you pay me in digital Barbados dollars because you would have an inventory of Barbados. And
is that kind of how central banks used to deposit gold with one another on reserve and keep accounts with one another as central banks?
Well, gold is different because gold is a physical asset.
Right, but the equivalent.
I guess you could think of it that way. Yes, I guess you could.
I think just to chip in, because I've seen Gabrielle build this from day zero of what you've done. Because in the UK, we did a first project with the British government for the distribution of social welfare. The government put a line through it because they said that the technology wasn't appropriate, which they were wrong about. Everyone knows I've got a fairly strong opinion. And right now, the British government is struggling distributing money to people who can't access. That system was built in 2016 would work. I think there's an enormous opportunity for the region to look at, say, what TransferWise did, because that discussion there is how TransferWise won't make money. They put dollars in London, dollars in New York, and they never move them. So I do think I would 100% concur that there's an opportunity to stave off the de-risking issues of the region and build an intra-regional settlement. I would back that 100%.
Thanks for that endorsement, John. I couldn't agree with you more. And I feel like this would be an extremely powerful reform that would really help, first of all, drive greater intra-regional cooperation, but also given supply chain disruptions, given the weaknesses in the remittance flows that we expect to get coming to this region, because if 27 million people in the US alone are going to be unemployed, and the World Bank says 20% of our remittance flows to the region are going to disappear, intra-regional activity becomes that much more important. We could no longer default to the US or the UK or Canada as our sun, moon, and stars, right? And I feel like this is the perfect opportunity for us to recognize that we need to really focus on maximizing the extent to which intra-regional activity can be promoted and keep it that way, even when things get back to normal.
Well, I don't know how much chance there is of whatever normal used to be coming back. But I would actually point out that a lot of discussion that tends to emerge when Cayman starts talking about regional agreements and regional initiatives tends to be the lack of trade that we share with regional entities, or the lack of common target markets, let's say, that we have. But I would point out in defense of what you're suggesting, Marla, is that fully 50% of the population in Cayman is expat. All right, so those people need to communicate and need to send and receive money with, 160 something countries around the world. So investing in a network like that would not be something that Cayman wouldn't be able to see some benefits from. So I would support that. Moving on, Charlie, as you see us struggling to recover from these economic impacts, we've heard Marla suggest a role that the central bank in a given country might be able to play. What role do you think an entity like Cayman Enterprise City can play in helping Cayman to recover? Hang on, Charlie, we need to unmute you.
Okay, apologies. Yeah, I think this is CEC's chance to prove the wisdom of the CI government in greenlighting our project in 2011. As you know, our project was born in the aftermath of the 2008 global financial crisis and is designed to help Cayman better cope with an event like this pandemic. So we're purpose built for a circumstance like this. And of course, the project primarily aims to do that by helping to create some economic diversity away from such a heavy reliance on financial services and tourism, and by attracting some foreign direct investment that is not so reliant on those two sectors. And we feel like we are definitely living up to those expectations, and in some ways, I think we're exceeding them. At the moment, there's approximately 240 companies established in the SEZ. That includes approximately 175 technology-focused companies. That is net of some recent attrition, which of course is understandable in the circumstances. But overall, the impact of our growth through the years has been substantial. And next week, we will release our annual estimated economic impact report, which will show that our project's contribution to the local economy exceeded US $50 million for the second year in a row, and tops US $260 million since inception. So we consider that our role is to continue to provide a first-rate platform for knowledge and technology-based companies to operate from, and to help build a vibrant community that allows them to thrive. And this will in turn drive significant and needed economic growth for the country.
Thanks, Charlie. John, both Marla and Charlie are talking about opportunities there, and some very specific, some very general. I think you and I were chatting the other day, and the phrase came up, it's often said that you shouldn't waste a good crisis. We've talked a lot about challenges, but what do you see as opportunities for the digital sector in Cayman, specifically? How can this crisis give us opportunities to maybe do some things that we hadn't thought were possible before?
So I would start off by being declarative and saying the world has changed forever. There is no normal. It's gone. Like our little children won't know a world without a pandemic. It's changed. Now, if we talk about the economy, we're in something that is being termed a GDP stall. Never, ever in our history has GDP just stopped. We've had crashes and they taper. And so at a stall, the positive view that we could take is that 5 to 8 years of change is happening in 9 months. People aren't returning to work in the same way. Productivity in certain sectors has gone up. One might say because of the lack of pointless meetings that last an hour because Microsoft Outlook says it should last an hour when it should last 5 minutes. Right? So if we look at what the opportunities are, firstly, the global economy is going to get hammered. We are going to see significant challenges. One great comment I saw this week is the challenges that the jobs that the change will create will not be in the physical locations where the humans are. I think this is where Cayman's opportunity is. So I've long advocated that the advantage of Cayman is that the digital economy doesn't require square miles. Instagram was how many employees when it was acquired. Digital does not require square miles. So let's look at every single business that is getting turned upside down and look at the ones that are going to boom, work out which ones are digital and which ones would benefit from being in a location with dynamic regulatory capability, with international capabilities. There's a whole long list. So the lean in here is, number one, to accept change and not to be afraid of it. It's gone. There's a new world. Number two, find asymmetric advantages. I'd literally have, in the CEC, a whiteboard of like, what do we have that no one else has? For instance, as soon as Cayman is virus-free and has the appropriate way to check people coming to the island don't bring this virus with them, because it's going to last 18 months to 2 years, how much would I pay to come with my family to go on holiday in Cayman so that my little kids run around on a beach and don't have to run around another parent, not a child, another parent getting aggressive with them? There's an asymmetric opportunity of being an island, so those asymmetric opportunities. And number three, get out into the world with the narrative on what Digital Cayman stands for in a world that has changed. I think the brave people in the world now go, look, it's changed, it's gone, it's different. However, these are the great new things that are happening. This is the role that Cayman is playing in the great new world. E-commerce has just gone through the roof. Alee, we've talked about this before. Like, what are the challenges in e-commerce? Well, there's a lot of online fraud, digital signing. There is a relatively short list of gigantic businesses that Cayman could be a global leader in, and that's what I advocate for, and I'm excited about.
One of the things that has made Cayman be successful in the past through, say, financial services has been a very conservative approach to risk and to risk management. And that pervasive risk-averse approach to things is present in the way we construct legislature, the way we construct policy, the way we do regulatory things, and our approach to just about everything. So, for example, one of the first things that happened when we entered a curfew was all of a sudden a fundamental piece of the financial services menu of services is to be able to notarize documents, opening up a bank account, opening up a trading account, being able to conduct a transaction. And the way those notary services were provided is through a physical presence of physically handing over a document and physically applying a stamp. Marla, just now you were talking about the challenges in banking, for example, of standing up in line to physically go touch money, or physically touch an ATM, or physically speak to a bank teller. Or one of the reasons why our remittance services were shut down here during, they still are, but were shut down during the curfew, was because the lack of social distancing available in the locations where those remittance services were located. So, as John says, if we accept that things have changed, then we need to be bold and perhaps put aside some of those very restrictive and conservative approaches to policy and to laws, and sort of take a bold new step forward. And one of those steps we need to take maybe is something you mentioned, Marla, which is looking at payment systems and digital currencies. So there's a lot of chatter about that sort of thing. Globally. You've mentioned that there's been some positive steps in your neck of the woods. What role do you think a digital currency could play post-COVID, and how do you think Cayman, what do you think Cayman needs to change in order to embrace something like that?
Well, Alee, I think that a digital currency, just to be clear, not a cryptocurrency, but a digital version of your fiat currency that's issued by your central bank or your monetary authority, which then makes it legal tender. Mm-hmm. That type of digital currency, which, for example, we're piloting in the EC, as I mentioned, which Bahamas has issued, the real power behind that kind of reform and development for this region is tremendous, and it centers around financial inclusion. It centers around ease of doing business and how much efficiency can be derived if you don't have to physically move cash or checks or do wire transfers and that kind of thing. But also around, and this is something that we get repeatedly plagued with in this region, the whole anti-money laundering blacklist, which just recently, was it last week, that came out, because you cannot as effectively implement anti-money laundering and CFT measures when you have 95% of your transactions being conducted in cash as effectively as you could when it's digital currency. Because when a central bank issues a digital currency, they can see everything. They can see where this, of course, within the privacy and cybersecurity legislation that exists in that jurisdiction, they would be able to see how this money is moving in the economy and where it's going and that kind of thing. And I have a brilliant example of this is at the IMF meetings last spring, I think it was, the central bank governor of Kenya, when he was talking about M-Pesa and the impact that it had there and how many people M-Pesa lifted out of poverty. He talked about the fact that the central bank was able to observe that at like 4 a.m, there was a spike in transactions, which they, of course, would not have seen without M-Pesa. When you working with cash, the central bank can't see this. And they were wondering, well, what's happening at 4 a.m? Why is there this spike in payments? Of course, they thought it was some sort of nefarious activity. But when they dug deeper, they were able to find that what it was is that there was this huge class of merchants, basically these women who would get up at that hour of the morning, call their farmer, place an order for fruits and vegetables, pay that farmer on with their phone on M-Pesa, have their goods delivered to their vegetable stall in the market. And as Governor put it, at 6 o'clock this morning, all of this commerce has taken place. All of these women have done so much business, and he's now deciding to wake up and get out of bed. And I'm saying that to say that there are so many powerful benefits to a digital currency that some of them you can't even imagine, because they would never have imagined that they would see this. And it gives you, again, that much more insight as to what's happening in the economy. Where is money being used? How is it being used? What kind of activity you have in your economy happening that you may not have even known and been aware of before. But I would still maintain that for our types of economies in this region, the most important and the most powerful use cases are around financial inclusion and ease of doing business, and of course, AML, CFT compliance. Now, in Cayman's case, because Cayman is very unique in that it is the only jurisdiction in this region that has a net outflow of remittances, largely to Jamaica. I think what could be, and I've had conversations with hotel workers in Cayman who come from Jamaica and their families are based in Jamaica, about the kinds of frictions and costs and inefficiencies that they face in terms of sending money home to Jamaica. And I had a conversation with a guy once, and I asked him, so how much does it cost you when you have to send this money home every week or every 2 weeks? He said it costs about 20 US. And I said, can you imagine if you could open your phone and open an app, send this money to somebody in Jamaica, and they receive it on their mobile wallet, in seconds, and it cost maybe, I don't know, $1 or less. What kind of a difference would that make in your life? Or is it not much of a difference? He says, no, that makes a huge difference. That $20 makes a difference in terms of whether my children go to bed hungry or fed. And so these use cases and these benefits of a digital currency are tremendous. And I feel like it would make a huge difference in the economies and in the livelihoods of everyone in this region and beyond, should we continue to adopt and grow in this space.
So from your perspective, given the region that you're very familiar with, do you think that there's space for the cryptocurrencies that are out there and the fiat digital currency to coexist?
The problem with cryptocurrencies is that in the first place, you need US dollars to buy a cryptocurrency. Okay. And that is a constraint. I know this is not a constraint in the Cayman Islands. You guys are heavily dollarized, probably the most dollarized country in the region. But
You say
could
that
you?
like that's a bad thing.
No, I never, no, never would I imply that. No, Cayman Islands is my favorite place, the best run economy in this region. You're kidding me? No, no, but if you think of somebody here in Barbados, somebody in Haiti, somebody in Jamaica, somebody in Trinidad, if they wanted to buy a cryptocurrency, the first thing they're going to have to do is find the US dollars to do that. And in many countries, their access to US dollars is not as easy as it is in Cayman. You'll probably have as much US dollars as you have water in Cayman, right? So that's the first challenge. The second challenge with a cryptocurrency and using cryptocurrency as a payment rail, if you will, to move money around the region, to move money even domestically, is that unless you use a stable coin, most cryptocurrencies change in value. And so it's difficult to think of Bitcoin, for example, as a store of value because it fluctuates. You do have stable coins like Gemini, for example, that don't change in value. So that's another.
What you're saying is that they could coexist because they wouldn't compete with each other. They have very different uses and
very different use cases. Yes.
Use cases. Yes. Okay.
Extremely different use cases. With a digital currency, right, like we do here in Barbados right now, with our M-Money platform that runs on, as I said earlier, synthetic CBDC, a synthetic digital Barbados dollar, I can open my M-Money app and I can send digital Barbados dollars to anyone whose phone number or address that I have. It's WhatsAppified, so everyone on my WhatsApp contacts that has M-Money shows up immediately. And this is how we send peer-to-peer payments all the time, and it costs nothing here in Barbados on our M-Money platform. And that's massive. We have had in the last 2 months a proliferation of delivery services, curbside pickup services, and so on, based on the COVID-19 social distancing protocols and restrictions. And the government basically said you are not to exchange cash because of the risks that carries. And so we've seen a massive spike in the amount of people getting onto the M-Money network and using it, based on how easy it is, and it's free, basically, to use it to send money to peer-to-peer or to pay a merchant with the app.
So one of the things that we've been talking about the last few minutes is basically a policy decision or a set of legislative changes that would enable us to embrace something like a digital currency. But there's some things that we maybe need in place to be able to take advantage of other opportunities in a post-COVID environment. And that would be more than just policy, it would be down to infrastructure. So I want to turn to John and ask, because John actually lives not in Cayman, but in the States. I won't say where in case he has security issues. But you've seen our infrastructure up close and personal. I think we've all talked about how difficult it is at times to open up a bank account and do very simple things, things that Marla's digital currency could really change. But as a technologist, when you're looking at implementing solutions or taking advantage of opportunities, do you think, John, that we have the necessary infrastructure, digital, physical, and otherwise in Cayman, to take advantage of opportunities that come our way post-COVID?
So I'll make a statement to say no with a quick however. So no in that the democratization and development of advanced technology through the internet, as in anybody in the world can do it, means it's done everywhere. When I say however, that one of the greatest challenges for emerging technology is finding a willing customer, a willing regulator, and a place to test it. And as a microcosm of all the world's challenges right now, You're a tourism-dependent economy with an airport that's closed. You've got 50% of people from around the world. You've got such a brilliant sort of customer journey for so many different customer journeys in the world, that I think it's an amazing place for technology to come and be assembled. The engineering of the technology is increasingly not a barrier. So Jeremy Rifkin and the zero marginal cost society will talk about how it becomes less and less expensive to launch an enterprise technology business. But do you have a telecoms regulator that you can work with in America? No chance. In Cayman, yes. Do you have and here's where I get to the government. I'd say probably, I think that you have every single piece of infrastructure to be able to execute, and a mindset shift that we can be the best assembly place in the world for digital technology. With the businesses that I've got in the CEC, we're assembling technology that we cherry pick from around the world, from Israel, from London, from MIT, and we're cherry picking them and assembling them, but in a construct that can be delivered back globally. We've spent, Alee, as you know, the last 2 weeks working with the Data Privacy Office around some new telecommunications networks that will create the world's most advanced data privacy policy. And it will be in Cayman. So if you want to run a business that is the most advanced data privacy business in the world, you can run it in Cayman. That's competitive advantage. I want to touch on a point that's a sore point, and you know that I'm not delicate, that it's fairly freaking obvious why you force people to sign pieces of paper in person, because it means they have to book a flight, fly to the island, and buy rum punch. Now, the economy but the economy of the Cayman Islands, I've just jotted the number down before, is $5 billion. In the next couple of years, e-commerce is 6 trillion. What is there a problem in e-commerce? Proving who you are digitally, paying digitally, fraud. All of these functions, you're a dollar-denominated country that has a huge regulatory infrastructure that is trusted by $3 trillion of the richest people in the world's assets in hedge fund trusts, and a $6 trillion annual GDP. And you have a $5 billion. And one of the key things in the global e-commerce world is trusting who's paying. And part of that is a digital signatory. So the way I look at innovation and Cayman's opportunities to go, look, fair enough, we've had this digital signatory thing because people have come here, but how's about we become the most advanced country in the world for secure e-commerce payments with, as Marla's hinting, the lowest friction way of making a payment. And we have the policies and procedures to protect anybody in the world. And why don't we start first and foremost with our region? And within our region, if we do that, if we have digital signatories and digital payments, then you know what you've got? Digital supply chains. And when you have digital supply chains, there's a firm that we spoke to today that has $81 billion of dry powder, of capital it hasn't deployed. And its number one place it wants to deploy is in supply chain finance as a non-bank financial lender. The reason it can't is there's no digital supply chain. So there are these gigantic opportunities. And Alee, we've talked about, I'm not saying for the world for now, but I am saying that Cayman should dominate the Americas in digital e-commerce. Sorry, bit of a fanfare, but it stands out to me that that's where the opportunity is.
We'll put the soundtrack in post-production. So Charlie, it sounds like Marla and John are going to be coming to you with some business ideas on how to streamline digital commerce going forward. Talk to us a little bit about what else is happening. I know there's a lot going on in CEC. I know there's a lot of companies that are working on lots of sexy stuff, but what's going on in CEC that you can talk about that's helping us get ready for a post-COVID world and an economic recovery?
Well, we've talked about the technology and the infrastructure needed to support that technology. One of the things that, and it's part of our mission, is to help create the critical mass of technically qualified talent that can help build it, or help build the infrastructure that's needed and support it on an ongoing basis. And one of the things that we're most proud of that we're working on right now is our Cayman Code Academy initiative. And that is designed to, originally designed as an in-person code academy to train people in the Cayman Islands to start down the road towards a career, in development. We kind of, obviously COVID has caused us to, we've hit a pothole, but we've refocused the Code Academy we're facilitating the online offering of the courses. And in addition to that, we are offering some need-based financial assistance to candidates. The whole idea behind building this globally significant technology hub is that it can't happen unless there are the people. And we've talked to many people, many clients, and or let's just say some through the years who have said to us that they want to come to Cayman, but they can't run their project from Cayman because they need to hire the talent that they need in the jurisdiction where they're doing the development. So we feel that what we're working on is a step in the right direction, and we feel like it's something that will contribute to the ongoing growth of the tech community in Cayman. Something that we'd like people to note, people on the call, we are offering, for people who might be interested in taking courses. We are offering need-based financial assistance to candidates up to 75% of the cost of tuition. So anybody who's interested in training in a career in coding, or maybe even for people who are just interested in upskilling, please contact us through our website, which is caymancodeacademy.com. We're also very interested in speaking to people that might want to offer tuition sponsorships to candidates, and or internships and job opportunities to graduates. And we feel as though that will be, we create the platform for the businesses to create the tech and the infrastructure, and as part of that infrastructure, we feel like we can contribute in a significant way in providing some of the technical talent that can build some of that infrastructure.
I have to agree that education, I guess it's almost cliche now, but it's so key, especially though in the tech sector where there are a lot of specialized skills that are not necessarily part of your typical university program, right? But there are opportunities within the region and within Cayman as well. People might be surprised to find what, you don't know what you're going to find until you start looking. So for example, when I joined the regulator, we're an economic regulator. What I needed was an economist. And I was told you'll never get one, a homegrown Cayman economist. And I think Marla would be happy to find out that I reached out to the university. We started an internship program that's still running to this day. We look for very, very specific skills in the STEM area, but also in economics. And we found an economist, and she's been with us since she was an intern and is doing her master's with us now. So just staying on that path of education and economics. Back to you, Marla. What's happening globally is inevitably going to impact our islands across the Caribbean, but to a degree, it matters not what we do locally. It matters what the big boys decide to do or not to do, as the case may be, in terms of massive impact to us, whether it's supply chain, food security, fuel to pump into our not only our vehicles, but our energy grids, which are predominantly driven by diesel across the Caribbean. What's the big asteroid impact that we should be looking out for economically as small countries? Not that we can necessarily do something about it, but what is it that we need to be worried about on the global economic scale that is inevitably going to have an impact on our small island nation economies here in the region.
Well, Ali, before I get to that, let me just respond to what you said about, a lot of what happens in this region will depend on what happens in the big countries. I mean, I think in general, we know that that is the case, but I don't want to discount or trivialize how much control we have over our own domestic policy and the stance that we take. And I just want to go back to reiterate how important it is that we recognize that we can leverage each other in this region to a significant degree to improve everything that we do, even fuel, as you mentioned. And so I feel like that's something we really need to think very differently about. And renewable energy is not something that we need to depend on any big country to promote for us. That's something that I think every country, including Guyana, which is the world's newest oil producer, including Suriname, Trinidad, and all the oil and gas producers in the region, that's, to me, one of the most important reforms we can implement in this region. Now, going to your question about what is the asteroid? I mean, we know about supply chain disruptions. We know about the sudden stop that is a supply shock that has then created a demand shock because, of course, people are unemployed and therefore can't consume, can't go on holidays. There is, of course, the shock to tourism and the fear. I mean, apart from when planes start flying again and airports open and cruise ships start cruising again, there is going to be that fear. There's going to be that demand shock where people don't have the kind of disposable income to engage in the kind of discretionary spending that they would have last year. But I think an asteroid that perhaps most people are not thinking about is, well, two asteroids. We have to think about the effect of the general election in the US. Now, you would have noticed that there was a meaningful shift in foreign relations stance and just the whole political stance of the US when President Obama left and President Trump took office. He basically dismantled the rapprochement that was taking place with Cuba. Generally, the relationship between the US and this region has suffered after President Trump took office. And I feel like, should there be another term for him, we can expect more of the same. And this is a man, don't forget, that called us shithole countries, right? I mean, I don't know that he was referring to Cayman specifically, but we know who he was referring to, and it's not the kind of stance that makes you feel warm and cuddly and makes you feel like engaging more closely with this country. But like you said, this is a huge factor in the way that things develop in our own economy. So that's the first thing. And again, the second asteroid, which relates to the US as well, is the fact that in times like this, when there is fear, there is a gravitation towards the US dollar. The flight to quality means that the US dollar gains strength, which it has been. If you look at the US dollar spot index on Bloomberg, the US dollar has been strengthening relative to every other currency on earth, basically. And what that does is each of us that have a currency pegged to the US dollar, it means that our currencies also become stronger relative to those currencies. So stronger relative to the yen, the euro, the pound sterling, Canadian, you name it. And what that means is that whatever we export then becomes less price competitive. Okay? And that's something we really need to think about. And I remember some years ago doing a presentation on tourism in this region and looking at the tourism arrival trends for each country in the Caribbean. And the two countries that consistently saw increases in their tourism arrivals. In good times, they saw the best, and in bad times, they saw the least negative. And that was Jamaica and the Dominican Republic. And the reason for that is those two countries have currencies that are they're not fixed currencies, they're not hard pegs. They are managed floats, if you will. And so what they do is they're able to depreciate their currency to allow for a maintenance of price competitiveness that a country with a hard peg like Bahamas 1-to-1, Barbados 2-to-1, Cayman, 1.2 US is it to 1 Cayman dollar. That actually puts us at a bit of a disadvantage based on a stronger US dollar. So what policymakers have to think about is how do you maintain price competitiveness in the face of a stronger US dollar? And it means that you have to look at your domestic price structure. So your wage structure, the two biggest costs in tourism are wages and energy. And so you have to look at how do we manage those costs in the face of a fixed currency peg and a rising US dollar. So I think those are the two big asteroids, if you were to ask me, that perhaps are a bit under the radar.
Thanks for that. I understand we have a few questions coming in from our viewers. So I'd ask Caitlin if she could take over and let us know what questions we have for the panel.
Sounds good. Alee, I'm going to direct one at you. There's been a lot of discussion on the chat about banking. What do you think the right approach is and some of the practical things that we can do as a community to push things forward to become a leader in the space?
I'm not a banker, but we have talked a lot about, within Digital Cayman, we've talked a lot about problems and weaknesses that we see in, I wouldn't say the banking system per se, but just the way things are done. So as Marla pointed out, the desire to do anti-money laundering leads to tons and tons of paperwork, blood samples, firstborn child, the whole rigmarole. Whereas if we could figure out a way to provide both the bank and the regulator with this oversight that it needed in a more digital friendly way, we could still achieve the oversight that the jurisdiction is looking for without making it so painful to conduct these transactions. And I don't know what the solution or solutions are. I would think that there are a number of things that we need to fix or address or change when it comes to either legislation, policy, or the interface between the service providers, the banks, and the regulator. But in our view, as folks trying to do business and trying to make Cayman attractive to folks who want to invest and do business here, it's a hindrance that needs to be addressed.
Can I just jump in on that question, please? Perhaps we need more competition in the banking space in order to drive innovation and to drive better performance and better client, service delivery.
As the head of a competition authority, sure, we welcome competition. And unfortunately, some of the things that the pain or the hoops that we get asked to jump through when we're trying to do business with local banks, they tend to blame it all on SEMA, the regulator. Oh, well, we got to fill this paperwork out. Sorry. And a lot of it is literally paper. You physically have to go and execute documents and whatnot. So,
well, if you don't mind me commenting here, that it's apropos the comment I made before about the technologies available. So it all ties together. So digital signatories speed up banking. If you have the right privacy laws, you can enable the privacy frameworks correctly so people can share their data. If you can do that, the most advanced fintechs in the world now have AI on the back end that interrogate the data and identify risks. It is all available, and I think you could, within 6 months, stand up the world's most modern digital banking infrastructure. And Alee, as we've talked, and Charlie, as we've talked, we know who the technology platforms are to do that. So there just needs to be a deep breath right now to say the world has changed. How do we create the most advanced digital finance platform in the world? Because we can't, and I'm not there yet, but if you look at it, there's a $6 trillion economy and you've got a $5 billion economy that's been hobbled by the tourism, and you have the ability with people like Marla and other people around. So the elephant in the room is it's going to be a small number of people that you need to sit down and go, right, we need to make a decision. And you're changing 80 years of behavior, say, but this is the time, because those 80 years have been predicated off a mechanic in the world that has gone.
So to a large extent, Caitlin, to sort of wrap up the answer, I think there are a number of policies and legislative frameworks that are already available to help address some of this, to help streamline doing business within the banking industry. So let's put it that way. One of them is what something that Marla mentioned very early on, which is our digital assets law, which is brand new. And one is something that would enable what John has been talking about, digital signatures. That's encapsulated in a law called the Electronic Transactions Law, which is not new, but needs some updates and needs some refresh. But between those two pieces of legislation, some creative and innovative policy making, we can accomplish much of what has been discussed so far here today.
If I may, I'd like to just jump in. Sorry, Alee. One of the things I think that causes problems for Cayman in the adoption of new technology and cutting edge technology is the size of our economy. It doesn't really justify a huge investment, but where I think we can, the advantage that we do have is what John identified earlier, Cayman as a test bed, where we offer. This is a place to develop it, and whether it's through the sandbox, your regulatory sandbox, or SEMA's new regulatory sandbox, or some combination of the two. The way and perhaps perhaps just me thinks this, but the way I see it is that the way for Cayman to get that new cutting edge technology is to be the test bed for it. Rather than trying to justify it on the basis of the size of our economy, it makes sense for you to come here and install this very expensive technology.
And I think on top of that, if I might add, that if you can be the successful test bed via your sandboxes and via your legislative reforms, what I think Cayman can really do, which if you look at what Estonia has done, you could become an expert and the global expert on how do you conduct a digital transformation in your financial sector and your economy on the whole. And then you can become that expert that goes out to other countries, the way Estonia's e-government academy does, and teach other countries how to do this, because you are the one who has done it and you know how it's done, you know what to do, all the legislative reforms you need, all everything. And that's how you can also monetize that expertise.
I think that's brilliant, and I could go at this for hours. You guys know me well enough, but Shopify, $55 billion business that allows people to set up e-commerce shops. Do you know what's difficult around the world? Setting up a company. Estonia allows you to set up a company. Why doesn't Cayman say, if you want to build on Shopify in the Americas, especially in Latin America, we will allow you to set up a company, go through KYC, and then we will help facilitate your touch point to the e-commerce platform that is Shopify. You do a strategic deal with Shopify, then every single Shopify startup in the Americas knows they can come to Cayman, figure it out. The scale of opportunity in e-commerce is just mind-blowingly big.
It shouldn't have to come to Cayman. It should be that it's
online. What I mean is, I don't mean physically come to Cayman. What I'm saying is, we can facilitate, like Estonia is your passport to Europe. I have an Estonian e-residency, and I have a company in Estonia to do business there. And it took me 2 weeks. If you could do that in Cayman for Latin America and the Americas, that on its own is probably the size of the GDP of the country.
Agreed.
Next question, Caitlin.
All right, we've got a lot of questions actually, so we'll pick a few to talk, and then we can continue the conversation online afterwards. But the next one is from Zena, and we touched on reskilling and development of students in Cayman. She asks, what about more general skills related to digital transformation for existing companies? And I think one of the things that I also worry about is how do we minimize that digital divide?
Charlie, you want to speak about some of the educational initiatives that CEC and Digital Cayman have been embarking on?
So I can make sure I understand the question. Is the question that, how do people who want to become, find opportunities in the emerging digital funding, how do they find those opportunities?
Yes, so not specifically to coding, but other skills. Are there other opportunities for individuals to upskill?
And well, I mean, from our perspective, we are, as you know, we're focused at the moment on coding. That's where we have started. But as far as training for for other careers, I think that the opportunity for people with some with an existing, even if it's a basic skill set, to get involved in things like internship programs and mentorship programs. I think that's where the opportunity lies. And very often, people who are confused about where, how they might be able to take advantage of an opportunity. They see it over there, but they're not sure how to get there. Getting involved with somebody who can say, okay, this is how I did it. This is a pathway that you can follow. And whether, or even that, so that would be a mentorship, or even an internship that becomes an extended job interview that helps you train while train while you're working. That eventually, if you do well, results in a job in a career. So from my perspective, that would be I think those would be the best ways to kind of start to bridge that gap.
Might I chip in here? Check, just not going too much feedback. So, no, I'm mid-40s. I've had to learn a new skill in the last 5 years. I think there's that thing I mentioned about the zero marginal cost society. Let me reframe it another way. AI is going to allow humans, it's not going to replace humans, but it's going to allow humans to do more. So we're currently looking at a project in mHealth, which is mobile-based health, to allow people to offer mental health support services in a non-clinical environment. So how does one person provide, like the Good Samaritans, like can volunteer to be a Samaritan? How does one person interact with 1,000 people? You can't. Now, the skill sets of the future, and I definitely see this in Cayman, because people are nice, friendly, warm, just great human beings. And the opportunity in telehealth and mHealth is gigantic. And I see somebody in Cayman now who's 40 or 50 years old learning how to use these tools, to use AI to interact with 10,000 mental health patients in the US. There's a tremendous opportunity. And I want to convey that the more advanced technology gets, the less you need to know about coding. So yes, there is coding, but don't let that put people off. Coding is a specific function, but there are platforms coming out now that are no-code platforms where you don't even need to know how to code to build software. So I'd want to convey that more and more it's going to be, how can I use this tool and my human capabilities of being kind and generous and listening to provide a service to somebody who needs it. I think Cayman could have a gigantic mHealth platform that uses technology to scale services, especially into the US. So I see a lot of opportunity not to have to learn how to code, but have to learn how to play a new video game.
Excellent, thank you. Marla, I've got a question from you that came in. What was the name of the platform they're using in Trinidad to send peer-to-peer funds? That question was from Deval.
I don't know that there's one in Trinidad, but the one we use here in Barbados is called M-Money.
Okay, thank you. And maybe we'll ask another question. David asks, might be a bit of a longer conversation, but maybe you can kind of summarize here. Without tourists USD coming to Cayman, is there risk of a shortage? Obviously, efficiency advantages of central bank digital currency, but could it mitigate or eliminate any shortages of US versus KYD, which is pegged to the US? Big risk of correspondent banks de-risking, severing offshore banks. Many thanks for any thoughts.
Again, I'm not a banker, but I don't think that tourism is the source of physical cash for us. I think a lot of those transactions that tourists, especially stayover tourists, are done via credit cards, right? So I don't see that as a particular problem in terms of physical cash, but I'm not an economist either. We have one on the panel talking about M1, M2, and those things, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you're right, Ali. The balance of payments account is the account that measures all of your international transaction in any one country, all of your inflows of foreign currency and all of your outflows of foreign currency. I think you're right that a lot of the inflows of foreign currency into Cayman Islands is probably not tourism. It's probably more from the financial services sector and the fees that industry generates. Now, in addition to which, you have a lot of entities in Cayman that pay salaries in US dollars, for example. So you have a huge deposit base. When I say huge, relative to local currency deposit base in US dollars. So that's another safeguard. But on top of that, you have what is called a currency board arrangement in the Cayman Islands, which is actually for small countries, it's a tremendous stabilizing force. It's the same in the Eastern Caribbean, and I believe the same in Bermuda, where the local monetary authority can only print so many KYD or local currency insofar as they have backing in hard currency, in other words, in US dollars or perhaps euro or pound sterling, depending on which basket of hard currencies they choose to use. And so I think the risk in the Cayman Islands is much less of a balance of payments crisis, whereas you have other countries like Bahamas, for example. Suriname, I think, is right at this moment in the midst of a balance of payments crisis, meaning they've run out of foreign currency. And I quite expect that by next year, Trinidad and Tobago will run into a balance of payments crisis. But the Cayman Islands, I think, is probably the furthest from that in this region.
Okay, thank you. This one is from Jason. He says, how do we expand and add more data services when our bandwidth is maxed out? This is a significant situation that needs to be looked at before any serious additional digital services or platforms will be considered in Cayman.
So I'm assuming that he's referring to our off-island connectivity. So off-island connectivity is nowhere near maxed out. There are two basic submarine cables, and I was in the industry when both of those were landed, bringing them ashore. That didn't get these gray hairs just yesterday. And those cable systems have actually been upgraded over the years. You do that on fiber optic cable system by doing what's called adding a color. So you basically add another wavelength from the lasers that feed the system. So they have much more capacity than we could use. Also remember, one of them, the Maya 1 cable system, was designed to connect not just Cayman, but a whole half dozen other countries along the Central American corridor back up to the US. So there's inherently a lot more capacity there than we are currently using. The issue there isn't a lack of capacity. The issue is that the cable systems that we rely on were designed and built 20 odd years ago. So they were designed and built in the telephony era, not the internet era. So that, combined with the fact that technology has really advanced since then, means that the connection between us and the real internet, because every internet service provider circuit that you get to your house or your business in Cayman is nothing more than an on-ramp to the internet. The real internet begins in Miami, in a place called the Nap of the Americas, which is a tier 1 peering point for global internet providers. The problem is that our connection to facility to that peering point in the States is slow because we're going over older infrastructure. It's a thing called latency. So basically, you get a delay when you're trying to do things. So until we fix that kind of thing, the question about services is accurate when you start talking about things like day trading. So we're just not anywhere near close enough to one of these markets, London or New York, to be able to do that high-speed trading that those guys do because of the type of connection that we've got to the internet. And other things like cloud services. If we wanted to be a global cloud services provider, for example, if we wanted to, as Marla and John were talking about, create a digital currency or a digital payment system, we would be restricted because of the latency that our connections today provide. So the transactions wouldn't happen quite as fast as you might want them to happen. So there are some restrictions there. We are working on it. We're trying to, we've been speaking to a number of potential investors in submarine cables around the world to bring a new cable system to Cayman, and that work is ongoing.
So I jump in here, and Alee knows I've got an opinion, not that I don't have just one, I have several. But it ties into the vision. So that's a brilliant question. But if the vision of the leadership of the country is we are going to be Digital Cayman, we're going to lead, then you can rock up to the World Bank and say, we need $200 million to have. Boris Johnson's about to spend a fortune getting high-speed broadband up in the Lake District. Same narrative. We have to be digital. Now, Cayman has a big enough stick, just about, because of its importance to Wall Street, just being blunt, that it might be able to carry the can for a bunch of regional islands that Marla's talking about. And therein lies an investment thesis. And so I am one of the people on the finance side of the table that's very interested in, if the leadership steps forward and says we are going to be Digital Cayman, to finance or find a way to finance that change. Alee, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's completely doable. It's just a dollar amount.
$50 million.
Yeah, not
That's what we need to run a cable from Cayman to Florida.
Yeah, not expensive. In the context of a $6 trillion economy, not expensive.
Okay, great. Shifting gears a little bit, Dr. Linford says, what are your views on the possible negative effects on commercial real estate? Will the new normal of working from home persist post-COVID-19? And then Paul added, maybe this could be an opportunity to reinvest or revisit the planning laws around residential space in the center of Georgetown and revitalize it as a living town. Charlie, maybe you want to jump in there?
Well, I'll start. Yeah. I think that companies are going to be under pressure. Maybe they might even be interested in taking the initiative in accommodating more of their staff working from home. Even if that is only a few days per week, and I'm sort of envisioning, and we haven't seen evidence of this yet from any of our clients, but I'm just kind of thinking ahead about what we might anticipate. I'm thinking that we might see some companies decide that they don't need a desk for everyone. They need a pool of desks that people can share, and some people will work at home, kind of on I wouldn't call it a shift basis, but at their discretion, provided that they still come into work, when they're needed, whether for team building or collaboration or any of those sorts of things. So. It'll be interesting to see where this does go. Again, like I said, we haven't seen any indication of it yet, but I'm sure that there is this will be that will be included in the new normal. Having said that, I'm willing to bet there's a lot of people out there that would just love to go back to the office right now. Even if it was just for a day or two. I think one of the things that will come out of this is that people will recognize that. Maybe working from home is great, but you wouldn't want to do it necessarily full time. You still want to come in, meet with your team, work on things together, develop some camaraderie and some just find better ways to collaborate in person, and then maybe go away and do some of that remotely. But I may be taking an old school view of this. If anyone can do it, successfully, it's going to be the technology companies that are set up in the special economic zone or elsewhere. But if anyone can do it, it's going to be the technology companies. So interesting times ahead.
Certainly. Now, I realize we've gone over time, so before we conclude today's session, is there anything else that anyone would like to add before we close?
Floor is open. Any closing remarks, ladies and gents?
I just would like to say congratulations and thanks for having this forum. I think it's a really important one, especially since I think the Cayman Islands government is probably the most progressive in the region. And I feel like, I hope they pay attention to some of the ideas discussed on this forum today. And I think there really is a huge opportunity. This crisis is pregnant with opportunity, I think, for transformation. And already there was that diversification mindset, which is why we have Enterprise City and Health City, for example, in Cayman. And I think that establishing the Cayman Islands as the digital hub for the region, as John suggested, and then becoming the expert that you can then teach the rest of the world, certainly the rest of the region, how to do it. I think those are tremendous opportunities available to the Cayman Islands government at this point in time. I hope they're paying attention. And thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this forum.
I'll say one thing, if you don't mind, before we go. I mentioned that we've seen some attrition. It's been small so far. Hopefully, it'll stay that way. But what I'm seeing more of is that there seems to be a lot of pent-up energy in the tech sector that's just waiting to be unleashed. And from where I sit and with the variety of people that I'm speaking to and their enthusiasm and their commitment to coming to Cayman as and when they're able to, I do think that the brightest days are ahead for tech in Cayman.
Thanks, John.
Well, the man of little words. No, it's I love being part of this. You guys know I've been a big believer in Cayman. There's a bunch of work that you've been doing for 6+ to 10+ years that I cannot advocate strongly enough that now is the time to step up and say we can lead. You don't need to have solved all the problems. You do need to be clear about where you're going and that the place is open for digital. And I'm on the phone every day and people don't know what to do. And Cayman has a number of things it can stand up and say, we can do this.
Thanks, everyone. Really thank the panelists for taking the time to chat with us today. I hope somebody was taking notes. There were some really good business ideas that will need to be licensed, I think, by entities like mine. So I look forward to continuing the conversation online on our Digital Cayman Slack channel. If you want to participate in that, please go to Digital Cayman's website and register to be added to that channel. And I'll hand it over to Caitlin for any other closing remarks.
Yep, exactly. Continue the conversation online. Thank you everyone for joining us. Really appreciate taking the time out to attend. Again, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Cayman Tech City and Digital Cayman, for making this all happen. Digital Cayman memberships are complimentary for the time being, so please do take advantage and register on the website. So thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next Tech Talks.